Hey everyone. So with the playoffs almost here, we all have our favorites and the names that are constantly being talked about for to win the Stanley Cup. You know, teams like Nashville, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, Boston, Winnipeg. These are kind of like the favorites going into the postseason and who we expect to make deep playoff runs and have a chance to win the cup. Let's talk about some sleeper teams that are lower seeds and aren't really talked about as favorites at all, but teams that I think could really be disruptive and maybe pull off a couple of upsets, make a run, and go really deep. Now, I'm not saying that these teams necessarily are going to go to the conference finals or the Stanley Cup finals or win the cup or anything. I just think they can be disruptive and kind of, really shake things up and knock out teams that maybe we think of as favorites. And maybe they could go all the way to win the cup. Who knows? It's the NHL playoffs. We really don't know what's going to happen. But I'm just saying that these teams I'm about to talk about could really win a couple of series and make a statement that we really didn't expect, like, say, Ottawa last year going all the way to the conference finals and playing a very good series against Pittsburgh before finally losing. So these teams are either third in their division or wild card teams that I think could really shake things up and make a run. First one, Columbus. The Columbus Blue Jackets, they're probably going to play Pittsburgh in the first round. They have been playing incredible hockey lately. They're a very deep and well-rounded team. They made some really good depth additions at the trading deadline, bringing in Mark Letestu, Ian Cole on the back end. They have a great goaltender in Sergei Bobrovsky. This team is much better than they were last year when they lost in 5 games to Pittsburgh, and I think they could make a real statement. If they knock out Pittsburgh in the first round, watch out. They could go all the way to the conference final and maybe even the cup final. I think they're a very dangerous team, and they're not a team that I would want to face in the playoffs. They've got John Tortorella coaching. They've got some really good veteran players, guys like Brandon Dubinsky, Nick Foligno. They have a fantastic defense core led by Zach Werenski and Seth Jones. This team is built very well for playoff hockey, and if they can get by Pittsburgh, then I think it could be a very long run for the Blue Jackets this year. And Pittsburgh's not as good as they have been the last couple of years. So I think Pittsburgh is vulnerable to a first-round exit this year. So I think Columbus is very good and could go very deep. The other team in the East I really think is a sleeper is the Philadelphia Flyers. They've got so much talent. They're fairly top heavy, but they've got so much talent up top in their top 6 forwards and their top defense pair. Goaltending is the big issue with Philly, and obviously goaltending is huge in the playoffs, absolutely crucial. But if you remember, when they went all the way to the finals against Chicago back in 2010, I believe that was the year that Brian Boucher and Michael Layton were the Flyers goalies. So it wouldn't be the first time that an unexpected goaltender got hot for the Flyers and took them on a deep run. If Mrazek can catch fire in the playoffs, he could backstop that team to a long playoff run if he gets hot at the right time. That's a big thing in the playoffs. You don't necessarily have to be an elite goalie to go far in the playoffs. You have to be a hot goalie. And if you catch fire at the perfect time, the next thing you know, you're all the way, deep third round or later in the playoffs. And Philly is a dangerous team that I would not want to play. They're in the second wild card spot somehow right now, but they've got, you look at their forwards, they've got Claude Giroux, obviously, Wayne Simmons, Jake Voracek. Travis Konechny has had a fantastic season, and he's really coming out. Sean Couturier also, he was a great two-way center, really known for his defense, but now he's put up a ton of points this year. They've got a ton of great talent up front, and then the back end, they've got Shane Gostisbehere and Ivan Provorov. Like, both of those guys are fantastic young defensemen who can both play defense well and put up a lot of points. Philly is going to be a tough out. Even if they lose in the first round, it's going to be a long series, and this is not a team that I would want to play. I could definitely see them going to the conference finals. Maybe even the cup. I wouldn't bet on that, but I think they have a good enough team and enough talent to where they could make a run like that. Now out west, sleeper out west, the Los Angeles Kings. They started off the season on fire, and then they went downhill and struggled for most of the rest of the year. But they've been really good lately. The last 10 games, they've been really good, and they have a veteran team that I would not want to play in the playoffs. That I think they're going to be a very tough out, no matter who they play. Obviously, they're backstopped by Jonathan Quick, who's won 2 Stanley Cups already. They've got Drew Doughty, they've Andrei Kopitar, Dustin Brown. Like, their core players were all there for their Stanley Cup wins. So they've got, really good veteran players who have won the Stanley Cup before. They won one of those years. They won the Stanley Cup as an 8 seed. They barely got into the playoffs and then went on a huge run and went all the way to win the cup. I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that happen again with LA this year. We saw how dominant of a team they could be at the beginning of the season. They couldn't maintain that for the full season, and they went through some real rough stretches. But if they go on a run like that in the playoffs, then watch out, because they're going to be really difficult to knock out. And Nashville is going to be a very tough out, but LA can play with Nashville if they're playing their best hockey. And that's scary, because that could mean that we could have a big time upset in the West, and we could have a Stanley Cup finalist from the Western Conference that maybe at the beginning of the playoffs we didn't think was possible at all. So I would really watch out for LA. And the other sleeper out west, another California team, the Anaheim Ducks. So Anaheim had a horrible start to the season, mostly because they were just riddled with injuries. Everyone was out. And they got off to a pretty poor start, but they've really come on in the second half. They've jumped a lot of places in the standings up to being a playoff team. They're clinched. They're going to be in the playoffs. It's just a matter of who do they play, San Jose or Vegas. And again, much like the Kings, they don't have the Stanley Cup winners on their team, except for Getzlaf and Perry from 2007. But they are a team that's consistently in the playoffs, and they have a lot of veteran players with playoff experience. I think this is the 6th year in a row that the Ducks have made the playoffs, so a lot of their players have played in the playoffs before. They're a very physical team. They're built for playoff-style hockey. And I think no matter how bad their regular season was, they're going to be very difficult to knock out in the postseason. It's going to take a really hard, strong effort, heavy hockey, and a really full 110% to beat the Ducks and get them out of the playoffs. So they're another team that I would not want to play in the first round, because I would be very nervous about getting upset. Because even though they're a lower seed this year, they're built for the playoffs, and I think that they could make a serious impact and maybe a deep run. So those are just 4 teams I think that they're lower seeds, but I think they have the chance. I'm not saying they're going to, but I think they have the chance to really shake things up, knock out some favorites, and make a deep playoff run. So that's just what I think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Help spread the word about this channel. We want it to keep growing. We're up over 40 subscribers now, which is fantastic. Just keep the ball rolling, keep adding. Hopefully someday I'm up over 100, over 1,000, over 10,000. So thank you guys again for watching, and talk to you soon.